Hello and welcome to today's Working Lunch with Professional Advisor. My name is Katrina Lloyd, I'm Editor-in-Chief of Professional Advisor and I'm going to be your host for today's session. I'm joined today by speakers from L&G to explore beyond the horizon, navigating the new landscape of retirement solutions. Very pleased to be joined today by Joanne Cohen, she's Strategic Partnership Director at L&G Retail Retirement, and we've got Nick Birdseye, Strategic Partner Development Director at L&G Home Finance. Maybe before we start the session, you could just tell us very briefly about your role at L&G and what you do. Jo, I'll come to you first. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. So I've been at Legal & General for the last 7 years, predominantly in the accumulation space, implementing and managing DC pension schemes for some of the largest schemes in the UK, and now work in the decumulation space, so looking at the retirement income market and how that supports our advisors across the country.
Great. And Nick, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I've been with Legal & General since 2012 and our home finance business since we created it in 2015. And my role is to work with the major distributors in the sector to help them grow into the market, but also to encourage advisors who are not yet in the market to enter the retirement lending space and think differently about housing wealth.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. And we're going to be talking about retirement today. Retirement isn't the finish line. It's a new chapter shaped by evolving dreams, shifting priorities and unexpected challenges. So this session is going to examine how economic uncertainty and changing behaviours are redefining how clients view their future. We're also going to be exploring the changing landscape of retirement income solutions, including the future of annuities and equity release, and how these products are converging to meet more complex client needs. And we're going to discuss how advisors can turn these shifts into meaningful opportunities. Before we start, just some housekeeping from me. I'll just move the slides along. Please put your questions for our speakers today. You can do that using the chat function at the bottom of your screen. We're going to send you a link to the recording of this session within 48 hours, so do please feel free to share this with colleagues. And you'll also receive an email about your hour CPD for this event this week. Before we start, let's have a look at our learning objectives from the session. We're going to be exploring the shift from accumulation-focused planning to holistic retirement strategies, recognise the strategic role of property wealth and guaranteed income in modern retirement planning, and identify how advisors can enhance value through effective communication and collaboration. So just a reminder about the questions. I'm going to hand over now to Jo and Nick to start their presentation.
That's great. Thanks very much, Katrina. So, guiding clients through shifting goals. What we're going to look at today is talk about retirement. Like Katrina said, it isn't the finish line anymore. It is a new chapter for clients around their evolving dreams, their shifting priorities and their unexpected challenges that they will face. But there's also other challenges in there. There's a lot of economic uncertainty at the moment, as well as behavioural shifts. So what we'd like to do today, myself and Nick, is talk to you about how you can support your clients in looking at that change of uncertainty and bringing them and showing them the opportunities instead. So the search for certainty and flexibility, what does the new reality look like? So myself and Nick, we've got vast experience in the retirement income market. At L&G, we have 5 million customers who are currently in the accumulation phase and 1 million customers who are already in decumulation. Legal & General is the UK's largest asset manager, and we currently have £92 billion of the annuity portfolio. So we're well versed as what is happening in retirement at the minute. But a stat on the screen at the moment is that £896 billion figure. And that's a figure that just simply blows my mind every time that I say it. So that amount of money is expected to pass into decumulation over the next 10 years. So not only is retirement a hot topic now, it's going to be an even hotter topic for the future. But behind all these facts and figures is the people. And this is the bit that I am really passionate about. And a number on there is 30%. So it's only 30% of people who access their pension plans last year took regulated advice. The fact that 70% of people are making life-changing decisions without any regulated advice, quite frankly, makes me really sad. But also the other facts on there. So 49% of workers are not confident with when they will retire or with a comfortable income. And 57% of Britons say challenges in the world would have made them feel less certain about their future finances. So why is that? We're going to unpick some of the reasons and what has changed in the last 45 years. So I like to remind my parents that my life in 2026 is very different to the life that I grew up in the 80s. So first of all is DB pensions. So as we all know, DB pension schemes are in decline, and the people receiving those DB pensions are in decline. So by 3% every year, according to the pensions regulator. We've also got this new concept of the sandwich generation, and my colleague and dear friend Mike is a prime example of that. Mike lives in London. He's got 3 adult grown children living with him at home, all of whom can't afford the extraordinary high rental prices to live out in London, but also can't save quick enough to get the deposits to get on the first rung of the housing ladder. Mike, in addition to his 3 children, Mike also has his adult 93-year-old mother-in-law living at home with him. So Mike simply does come to work for a rest. So with this concept of the sandwich generation, but people are also working and living longer. So much so that there isn't anything so much as a default retirement age anymore. People are working, prolonging into their 70s. So much so by people working into their 70s has increased by 60%. In addition to that, people are living longer with chronic diseases and health conditions, but the average age of people is also increasing. So the good example of this, although extreme, there's David Attenborough, somebody who I would love to have around a dinner table. You know, yes, he is working longer, but he's actually going to be 100 next month. And another great fact that I like to explore and highlight to people is that by 2050, we're expected to see 3.7 million centenarians in the UK, and 1 in 4 people are predicted to be over the age of 65. So in addition with all of them stats, there's also the shift in behavioural barriers. So what do people want to do? What is their purpose? And we'll call the retirement age that fragile decade. So the 5 years before they retire and the 5 years after. Now, a great story that I like to tell at events such as this and when I go out on road shows is my granddad, who when he retired, before he retired, he was a lecturer at Newcastle University. He used to drive the same route every day to work. He used to sit in the same office every day at the university, and he used to eat the same banana sandwich every day at work. And it's not just about a sandwich filling that would change for people. People's purpose and what they do every day does change, and that is a huge behavioural barrier for people. There's also impulsivity, so what people want to do with big purchases. You know, do they go out and spend a lot of their money on round-the-world cruises, buy new kitchens, decorate their homes? And with Legal & General, we do a lot of research into this. You know, I said before that we've got 1 million people already in the decumulation phase. Last year, we did a great piece of research called the lottery effect, and it looked at people, what they did when they came to decumulation and when they were able to get the 25% tax-free cash. Now, it's been 10 years since pension freedoms, and Steve Wedd said that everyone can go out and buy a Lamborghini if they wanted to. But what this lottery effect research showed is that some people were leaving themselves 9 years short in retirement. And again, that's a fact and figure that makes me personally feel very sad. There's also the other end of the spectrum where people are scared to spend, and that the desire for the legacy is there, and that's only grown stronger with the changes with IHT on pensions that's due to be put in place in 2027. And then there's also the spending reluctance. You will all have clients who are scared to spend, and that's the huge shift for people, you know, in a working lifetime where you're told to save, 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 and that huge shift to then be told that this is the time to spend. So this is where the 4 L's of income comes into play. And this is something that's been around for quite a while, but it's a brilliant slide to show to your clients. And the 4 L's, so the first one is longevity. So that's your living needs, your basic non-discretionary income, so for your food and your household bills. And this is generally where we start to see things like lifetime annuities and fixed term annuities. So what is going to cover your longevity? What's going to cover your lifespan to pay and cover your basic needs? The next next is your lifestyle. So what sort of lifestyle do you want to live? Do you want to go to Barbados on holiday, or do you want to go to Blackpool? The two things are very different. How do you want to eat? Do you want to eat out 3 times a week at a restaurant, or do you want to live off home cooked meals? Do you want to drive to the shops, or are you going to take the bus? This is such a huge important thing when it comes to retirement, and what that lifestyle looks like. What are your clients' dreams and aspirations with their lifestyle? The next is liquidity. So what luxury items are they looking to spend? Are they wanting to pay for their grandchildren's deposits on a property? Are they wanting to pay for a wedding? Are they wanting to go on a round the world cruise? What are those luxury items that they do want there for liquidity? And lastly is legacy. And what sort of legacy would they like to leave? And like I say, this is a topic that's on a lot of people's minds at the moment. And what does that legacy look like? And how can they calculate that? Now, considering things like the longevity and the guaranteed income for life with a product like annuities, that comes into play, and it makes it slightly easier for people to understand what that legacy pot looks like. But of course, there are concerns, and these are the 4 concerns that we are seeing in pre and post retirees. So the first one is running out of money. I have lost count about the amount of times that my mum is asking my dad, have we got enough money? Have we got enough money? So that is a huge concern for people, and none of us know exactly how long we are going to live for. So none of us know how much money we are going to need in the decumulation phase. The next point is funding care. Now, this can often be an elephant in the room. Nobody likes the idea of potentially having to go into care, but they also don't understand that this is a huge topic of how they're actually going to fund it. And what does that care actually look like? Is that care in their home where they stay, or is that somewhere like sheltered accommodation? We've talked about leaving a legacy, but do your clients understand the various mitigation strategies available, and how do they fit into their legacy aspirations? And then the last point there is doing what they want to do. Have they got the time and the money to live to their goals and their dreams? And this is the point that my colleague Georgia liked to talk about skiing. So her dad says he's always going skiing. And what we mean by that is spending the kids' inheritance. So moving on to living differently, we've talked about how people want to live and thinking about their aspirations and how that's going to be covered financially. So 56% of UK workers are planning to retire in the next 5 years and looking forward to it. So I could say that £896 billion is set to pass through decumulation. So this is a hot topic in the UK right now. 32% of retirees want to start new hobbies. So how are they actually going to fund that lifestyle? And it is all about reframing, and it's reframing with spending with purpose, but without risk. And to do that, my colleague Nick is going to talk you through a case study of Henry of how you can do that in practice.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Jo. So yeah, we're going to meet Henry, and we're going to think about Henry's situation, think about his hopes and aspirations, his time of life, and what he's planning to do and how he's planning to do it. I would also talk about the high quality and really impactful advisor conversations that we can engage Henry with to help him get the most out of his retirement. So if we run through his situation, Henry's a 55-year-old divorcee. He owns his home outright. He's looking to wind down his hours. He doesn't want a cliff edge retirement, but he wants to actually not do the things that he's doing at the moment full time. He wants to sort of to move through into retirement, generate some income, but not stop work completely, because that makes him anxious. And I think there's a lot to be said for lots of consideration around this point, that work and in the accumulation phase gives people a sense of purpose, and it gives them a sense of connectivity. And when people are getting to the stage pre-retirement, in that 5 years before the retirement event, then that can create a lot of anxiety around how am I going to maintain those connections and that sense of purpose through into retirement. Henry's got 2 children. They're in their 20s and wanting to get onto the housing ladder. He's highly independent and has been looking after his mother, who's in ill health. And his assets are just over £1 million, which include his pension, his housing wealth, and his savings and investments. So we're going to explore what's important to Henry and why it's important. And this takes us to questions that we describe within L&G as the power of three, and it's three questions. It's a what, and a why question. And what questions are really good for finding out about hard facts. So, what would you want to happen to your family or your home in a certain situation? What do you want to retire on? What do you want to do in retirement? It's great for looking at hard facts. The next what question is around significance. Why is that thing? What is it about that the thing that you want to do that makes it significant to you? And the third question is the why question, and this is a really powerful question. This is the one that gives meaning to the what, and why is it important to you? And it could be something. An example of that is, what do you want to achieve? Well, I want protection in place so that if my family, if I pass away, my family are looked after, or I want to build my pension fund to £1.5 million. Well, why do you want to do that? Well, I lost my parent when I was young, and my family grew up, in very difficult circumstances. I don't want that to happen to my family. Or, why do you want your pension fund to be that size? Well, I saw my parents didn't have good pension provision. They were self-employed. They ran their own business, and that didn't provide the pension that they wanted, didn't provide the income they wanted in retirement, and they didn't have the retirement that they could have had they planned more effectively and engaged earlier in the financial planning process. So, what, and why, and so if we go back to the why, and that takes us into those. Into the why is really the motivation that will help people take action. It will help you as advisors help clients understand why they should be taking action, why they should be putting plans into place, why they should be committing money to build up their pension funds, and why they should be taking certain steps in retirement to provide them with the things they want through retirement. Because we're definitely not in a one and done scenario. Retirement is a very long event, or that later life period is a really long event. I'll come back to that shortly. So let's look at Henry's retirement goals and the things that we would consider when we're building out a holistic solution. Well, Henry wants easy access to money to protect his lifestyle. He wants to consider a phased approach to full retirement. Remember, he's 55 now. His state pension will come in at 67, and he's got a pension fund. So, he's reasonably well provided for, but and with assets of over £1 million, there's definite potential there to build a good retirement package. But it's going to be a long to medium term holistic package rather than a once and done event. He wants to ensure he can stay in his home for as long as possible, and he's thinking about leaving a legacy to his children to help support their financial goals. And he wants to have a financial plan in place that provides him with confidence, clarity, and a guaranteed income. And these are the things that are important to him, through the what, and why conversations. And those goals will evolve as he goes through that phase of life. So at 55, the things that are really important to him will be different to the things that are important to him at 65. And that's why that ongoing long-term advisor engagement is really, really important for clients as they move through, into that retirement journey. We know from a recent SJP survey that the respondents to that survey, 96% of their clients said that actually taking advice helped them achieve better outcomes and better retirement outcomes than if they hadn't actually engaged with advisors. So we'll move on to Henry's bespoke plan and look at some of the things that, some of the options that we might engage Henry with as he moves through his retirement. So, first of all, 55, Henry takes his tax-free cash or pension commencement lump sum, I think in the modern parlance. He repays his mortgage with that, and he puts the balance into ISA. with stock and shares. So he's got money that's on equity growth opportunity, but also easily accessible should he require it. He also is looking at a fixed-term annuity on that period between his starting his retirement journey and getting into full retirement. And the reason he's looking at fixed-term annuity is that annuity can provide an income that supplements his reduced earnings through that period of time, with great potential to put money into that at the start, at let's say 55, and get that same money back later on down the line to consider again for reinvestment elsewhere, but having had the certainty and the guaranteed income from that product through that period of time. At that stage, later on down the line, Henry is keen to manage his money and wants to give that opportunity, that money opportunity to access investment growth return. So he moves into more of a drawdown phase, and he's excited about the potential that might give, both on the flexibility, but also the growth potential that drawdown can present. And that period of retirement might last for quite a significant time. But as Henry gets older, and we're still engaged with Henry, we're still having those conversations, we're assessing, what's going to be important to him and why it's important to him, then actually Henry starts to back away from those drawdown investment decisions and considerations, and starts to move more towards lifetime annuity investments, because that option is then providing the guarantee of income for Henry, and he's not having to think and worry about investment returns and investment decisions. And then latterly, Henry might be considering a lifetime mortgage. And there could be a number of reasons for this. It could be Henry's decided he's independent, he lives at home, but he's divorced, so he's solely responsible for himself. And he wants to buy some care into his home to provide domiciliary support. And a lifetime mortgage can be a really good way of funding that. And that lifetime mortgage would be repaid should Henry have to move into residential care later down the track, and then he'll have the proceeds of the property to sell to fund that residential care. But a lifetime mortgage could also be thinking about Henry's legacy wishes. We can also use the lifetime mortgage to create gifting opportunities for his children, and so that actually there might be an opportunity for an early inheritance there. So, as we move forward, we're thinking about the key actions to consider for Henry. And the first thing to think about is longevity. Now, if you're an advisor, you're going to be looking after mass affluent or higher net worth clients. That's the target audience for advisors. And the reality is that those people live longer than the average because they're better off, they're better provided for, they've got higher standards of living, they've got better health provision. So actually, in terms of looking at advisor client banks, then longevity and longevity risk is a really key issue to pay attention to. As Joe mentioned earlier, it won't be long before we've got over 3 million customers, clients who are over 100 years of age, and we know we have an aging population that's moving through. The numbers of people in those aging cohorts will increase year on year on year, and those lifestyle and income requirements will change. There won't be necessarily the ambitious spending, but there will be the care and provision spending requirements later in life. So we think about longevity, really, really important, and we need to build that longevity risk into our cash modelling considerations. We think about layering. Joe's already explained that sort of Maslow sort of hierarchy of almost sort of income needs, building in that base level of required income for essentials, but also thinking about annuitising that next level up, which is the lifestyle. Wouldn't it be great for people to move into retirement, absolutely having guaranteed a certain level of and standard of living that they want in retirement? We then might move on to a hybrid option where we're thinking about fixed term annuity alongside drawdown functions, drawdown opportunities, but actually using those different product sets to bake in different layers of guaranteed income with alongside flexibility. And that takes us to that phased annuitisation piece. As we get deeper into later life, then the competition starts to really favour annuitisation, because older clients can get really good annuity rates at the moment, and the risk that you have to put assets under to compete against those annuitisation rates or annuity rates is quite high. So there's a real conversation there to have that risk versus reward conversation later in life. Do I really want to put, does my client really want to put themselves at higher risk versus the guaranteed returns available on annuitisation? And then that whole, through that whole 55 plus journey, we've got housing wealth to consider alongside the investable assets. So most people will take the house that they take into retirement will be their biggest asset. And what we're not seeing is enough advisors using that asset or considering that asset as a manageable asset to support their clients' standard of living and retirement and retirement planning. If we go to an IFA and say, "What's the value of your practice?" they'll tell us about their funds under management. They never tell us about the property value under management. They never tell us about the 100 customers that they look after who all live in £1 million plus properties. The £100 million worth of property value that they could be managing on behalf of their clients. Properties are great. Everyone needs one to live in, but it's really, the way I describe it, it's really, really lazy equity. It doesn't actually do anything for your client. You live in it, and unless you actually find a way of putting that equity to work, then apart from the roof over a customer's head, it doesn't actually benefit them. So we need to really think and stretch ourselves in thinking about that. The other piece, thinking about that whole longevity piece is that 55 to 95 is a 40-year window. And if we think about, if we reversed it or sort of took it down the age range, how would we think about 25 to 65? All of the different life events and different stages that 25-year-old would go through to getting to 65, and all of the different advice conversations and considerations that you'd have over that 40-year period can be absolutely replicated, or should be thought about anyway, from 55 to 95. It's the same length of time, but we just think about it as being in retirement. But that in retirement, it can mean many different things to many different people. So, in summary, moving forward, whilst retirement is an individual pursuit, and everybody's plans and ambitions and concerns, will be different. As an advisor with a customer base, we should really be building retirement propositions that support, any number of different conversations at different stages all the way through that retirement journey, or that up to and into and through retirement journey. And we're not just thinking about we're not just thinking about pounds, shillings and pence. The stories that we tell, the conversations that we have are all about customers, their fears, dreams and behaviours, and helping them meet the aspirations that they have through retirement.
Great. Thank you.
So,
thanks very much.
Okay, I think I'm looking forward to Q&A.
Yes, and we've got a few questions through, and just a reminder that you can ask questions for our speakers as well. You should be able to see the button there to put any questions forward. So I suppose it'd be good to start, Joe. Maybe you can talk to us about how you see the role of annuities evolving in retirement planning over in the future? What sort of changes do you see?
Yeah, I see. Well, annuities have been increasingly popular. So the FCA came out with stats last year that annuity sales have increased by 12% in 2024. But what's really interesting is that they're predicted to increase to 41% by 2029, and that's coming from the FCA. So there's two reasons for that. Yes, rates are good at the moment. You know, interest rates are higher, gilt yields are higher, so you are getting a better return. But also it's been, 11 years now since pension freedoms, and we can see what people are doing with their money, but we can also see that, yes, people want choice, but they also want certainty. So I think the big change is, and I suppose the future is that annuities are going to become more popular, and that's not just me saying it from a provider point of view, it's also the FCA saying it.
And from a behavioural point of view, obviously, with the geopolitical turbulence we've seen this year in particular, it's very uncertain times. That's a lot of anxiety for people in this current climate, even.
Absolutely, we see, we see more and more people seeking out that certainty, and research we did last year, really demonstrates that people who have degrees of certainty through retirement are much happier in retirement as well.
And what about from an estate planning point of view? Again, as we know, huge topic for advisors at the moment, following the budget changes. Do you think these changes, you see them making annuities more attractive, and how are they sort of fit into the estate planning side of it?
Yeah, again, I think estate planning is huge. As Nick mentioned there before, there's a huge amount of wealth in people's estates, and it is becoming more popular, as well as also considering those IHT changes that's going to be implemented next year. So yes, I think it's the whole estate planning as a whole package is going to be more of a holistic package. Nick, I don't know if you agree with that. It's seeing what you've seen in the...
Absolutely. I mean, come April next year, everybody's IHT problem increases by the value of their pension fund, and we're going to need to be, gives advisors a fantastic opportunity to engage with those customers. We still await, a good degree of guidance from the government and the regulator in terms of the application of some of the new rules that are coming in. But definite space for opportunity, and looking at all of those different investment options through retirement to maximise estate planning opportunities.
Yes, and I believe we did have a question that came through. It's about double taxation on inherited pension funds from April 2027, and the person asking the question just wanted some more clarity on that. We spoke about this before, and I think you're going to be hopefully going to speak to your team and see what guidance you can give it. At this point, but they'll contact them.
It's a brilliant question, because it is something that we need clarity on, not just only as a provider, but advisors need clarity on it as well. As far as I'm aware, double taxation is still going to happen, but the details of that I'm not sure. So I don't think anyone is. I think our technical team aren't aware of the details yet, and that is quite important. We need to know how we're going to implement it, and how, such as providers like us are going to then claw back that, or how people pay for that IHT. It is a question that we'll definitely take to our technical team to see if we can get more of a solid answer on that.
Yeah, so there was this question around, we previously understood from the government's pension consultation outcome that HMRC intends to prevent double taxation on inherited pension funds. The question was around, thinking around how that might be put in place, looking for confirmation around that. Any details on the recovery mechanism, but again, you're saying that it's waiting for that detail to come through. Well, that'd be great if you could.
Definitely take that one away for our technical team.
You were talking in the presentation about you're seeing more people stepping back gradually, and Henry was your sort of example there, and that's sort of part-time sort of working and sort of phased retirement. Where do you see sort of fixed-term annuities fitting in when clients are trying to bridge that sort of gap, because it's been increasingly popular, hasn't it? Fixed term
annuities are really popular at the moment. I think it's a product that's kind of gone under the radar for so long. We're talking about people who are coming up to retirement and they're not quite ready to retire, so they're going part-time, getting a fixed term annuity to bridge that gap in salary. Or also they might have different scenarios. We talked about DB pensions. They might be waiting until their DB pension kicks in, or even waiting until state retirement age kicks in. So there's there's a multitude of reasons that we're starting to see the purpose for that. And it's also that, we talked about the economic uncertainty at the moment. People are trying just to, the line we use is prepare, don't predict. So in that preparation, it's looking at taking that fixed term annuity to try and avoid a little bit of volatility in the market, but not necessarily guaranteeing it for the long term. They just want a sort of set amount of time, which is why fixed term annuities are so popular at the moment. But I can only see, and the market in FCA is only going to see even further increased sales in the market for those products.
Yeah. And Nick, got a few questions about your side of things. So, what are some of the macro factors influencing the increasing importance of considering housing wealth in retirement planning and those advice discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. No, really, really topical point. I mean, I suppose that the big issues are the shortcoming in pension provision. It means that so we've got a big slug of consumers who, between at the moment 40 and 55, if you're somewhere in that space, then you're too young to get really meaningful defined contribution funds built up, and too young for that, and you've missed the DB bus as well, so you haven't benefited from defined benefit pensions as well. So there are going to be a lot of people, a great big slug of people coming through into that 60 plus cohort for whom their housing wealth is going to be their biggest asset, and they're probably going to be it's probably it won't be a mass affluent, it won't be high net worth. Will be some mass affluent people because the affluence is in their property wealth, but most a lot of mass markets as well, who will be seeking out advice as to how to bridge that gap from working into retirement. And housing wealth is going to become increasingly important. We heard the FCA last year, the CEO Nicola Rathie, actually talking to the market about housing wealth being should be considered in retirement planning and retirement funding. We as a manufacturer are looking at how we can make our products more flexible and more income friendly. So we looking at how we can actually take property wealth and generate income from it, as well as lumps, big lumps of money. Yeah, I think there's also the intergenerational gifting piece, the disparity between somebody who's a boomer, or from my generation, who when I got on the housing market, 3 times your income and a 5% deposit would start your house buying journey. It's very different now. There's a lot of wealth that we can move from the generation of people who are paying down their mortgages now and clearing and creating housing wealth, actually taking that equity and regenerating it or recycling it down the generations to stimulate the housing market and help family members get onto the housing ladder. So there are a whole number of reasons why we should be thinking differently about property wealth.
Yeah, we've got a question here that leads on from there around was an observation. There's been no mention of so far a deed, a variation of wills to move cash to children, grandchildren when they need the money the most. Many clients receive bequests quite late in life when they do not really need the full amount left to them. So I suppose it's giving some more.
Yeah, I mean, the average age of inheritor at the moment in the UK is 61. Now, by the time you're 61, hopefully you've done all the hard work, and it's a bonus. Whereas actually, if you could get some of that money when you were 41, when you were under your greatest financial pressure, then that would be much more helpful. Yeah. So advisors looking at ways and means of supporting that wealth transfer are really, really important.
Yeah. And we've got a question, I suppose it's a bit more around the advisor offering. If I'm not qualified to deliver retirement lending advice, how can I add it to my proposition and offer it to my customers?
That's a really great question, actually, because the number of so you need to be mortgage qualified, essentially, and you need an enhanced, for lifetime mortgages, you need an enhanced qualification. Not every practice wants to, bring somebody in to do that, although that is, that's the Rolls-Royce solution, as it were, offering that proposition under your own steam within your own branded business. But if you don't do that, then seek out a trusted referral partner, because there are really, really high quality advisors out there delivering this advice, day in, day out. Building those professional connection networks, where, if you've got a wealth practice, you seek out a retirement lending practice to partner together, and offer the proposition through that route.
And Nick, we've got a question here. How does Nick see the challenge of the cost of downsizing versus equity release, given the accumulating debt with equity release?
I think downsizing should always be part of an advice conversation. It's there are a number of things to consider. Borrowing against your property comes with the risk of debt accumulation. Now, clearly, you've got an IHT issue over here, so if you're building debt against it and you're getting the benefit from that debt that you're creating, then there's a conversation to have there. With downsizing, downsizing on paper is a great idea. It would be even better if we didn't get charged stamp duty on downsizing. That would free up that market and actually stimulate the market, but there's no sign of that. Government doesn't want to give any sort of tax away. It wants to collect more tax. But also downsizing means you tend to move away from your community, because people don't downsize on the same road. If you live in a lovely row of detached suburban properties, and you've got your being stereotypical, but you've got your golf club, your bowls club, your WI, you know the people in the row of shops, the people at the doctors, To downsize, you probably move away from all of that because you don't downsize on the same road. So whilst it absolutely should be a consideration, it's not the answer for everybody. And that's why advice and engaging and those, what, why conversations are really, really important.
I agree with that. And I'm just thinking of my parents. They've been in their property for 50 years. There is no way my dad will move out of that house. It's just not possible. It's not even a conversation that he wants to bring up. And I think that goes back to the 4 L's of what sort of lifestyle and how do they want to live. Thinking about my dad, he would much rather stay in that property and have a different type of lifestyle or do equity release than look to move. And I think that's the type of life he wants to live. He wants to stay in that home. And it goes back to that individual pursuit, doesn't it, of how somebody wants to have their retirement.
What do you think can work well on the communication side, communicating these options to clients? Because you were saying in the presentation, it can be quite difficult conversations for some people, and it can make people feel quite anxious. What do you hear from advisors? What can sort of help when they are trying to explain some of these options?
I think sometimes it's about being brave. It's about, I've got an IFA, and he'll come out and we'll have quite challenging conversations, and and whilst I'm in the business, I respond, and my wife responds well to that because we're being given things to think about. We're being, some of our perceptions are being challenged. Some of our, well, have you thought about this? Or how long have you thought about this? Or, why is that important to you? Well, you say you want to do that, but why do you want to do that? And actually, just being brave and testing those what we might, take as assumptions, is really, and actually, clients get benefit from those, we've got to earn our money, haven't we? We've got to go out and have those testing conversations. Otherwise, we're not doing the job, are we?
And let's really think about their individual circumstances. Is very, and as you mentioned as well, the journey of what you might want to do at 55 is different. Reviewing that throughout the life.
Absolutely.
I was actually at a roundtable yesterday with advisors, and we were discussing this exact topic, that not only do they have to give financial advice, some of the time it's then talking about maybe behavioural differences, it's difference of opinion in between the husband and a wife, and it's also counselling on some steps of like coaching and really what they want to do. But there's a lot of difficult conversations, especially when you're coming down to inheritance, if you've got stepchildren or, how the family dynamics work there. Yeah. And it is, unfortunately, a position for advisors that we are asking those questions that they've probably never, it is the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do if you are seriously ill? Who is going to look after, maybe the disabled son that nobody's thought about? My friend's in that situation at the moment. And I suppose the position of the advisor is to try and eke out those difficult questions to understand what that decumulation looks like, but also what their future, and the happiness looks like. Yeah. So it is a really important and a huge, I do empathise for advisors at the moment. Yeah.
I think one of the roads we've almost been pushed down is that we've become very technical.
Yeah.
And advisors become very technical. Well, actually, the technical stuff is just the output of the conversation. The really important stuff is the fact finding, is the questioning, is the coaching, the counselling. The actual the garden path conversations. They're that's where the answers lie. And the actual technical output. Is
the solution,
it's just
isn't
a
it?
thing. It's just a thing at the end. But too often, the technical output gets at the front of the customer journey rather than as the solution.
Yeah.
We had a couple of questions submitted around drawdown. So I think, Joe, maybe you'll take these. So, is reducing investment risk during flexible drawdown a recommended route or a dangerous path to follow?
That's a really good question. I like it. Well, I think the biggest risk would to be put everything on black and end up with no money. So that would be the biggest investment risk. I think it links back to the 4 L's again. So looking at trying to get, nobody knows how long they're going to live for. So covering that basic income need. So looking at that and taking, out some risk so that they've got that guaranteed income for life is number one. The second thing is what is everybody's attitude to risk is very different. So what does that look like? And also the question is what would they be de-risking for? So necessarily what would they be wanting cash in ISAs for? What does that look like? Is it to maybe replace a dishwasher? Or is it because they know that their grandchild's getting married in 2 years' time? So I think it's and that's why it's so important to have yearly reviews, I would say, because people's situation and circumstances change all the time. And this is why we talk a lot about life quakes in our presentations. And we talk about retirement being a life quake, but then other life quakes, if you're diagnosed with cancer or if you get divorced, these are huge life quakes. So what somebody's journey might be could then pivot straight away, and their attitude to risk might be higher because they might have lost some assets, or it might be lower because they've reassessed how they're living their life. So I think there's no one guaranteed answer to that. I think there is a level of de-risking to be done to guarantee that income, so you can eat and heat your home is the thing that I always say. Nobody ever wants to think how they're gonna choose in between what they're gonna have for dinner and how hot they're gonna have their home. That makes me sad that people in this country are doing that. So I think give it the guarantee, and then you can play around with the level of risk that you want, and that's the bit that advisors can have flexibility on. And
another question, what level of monthly drawdowns should be held in cash to support future drawdowns? Enough for 3, 6, 12 months? I think it goes back to what are you doing? What do you need that cash for? So what's the purpose of the cash? The purpose of the cash would not be, to minimise sequence and risk or and volatility, that sort of thing, because you would probably want more of a longer term option such as an annuity. But the cash there I would assume is so for any like fixing your dishwasher if that's what you need. So I think it depends on your individual circumstance and what your goals are within the next 12 to say 24 months. We talked about the risks within the presentations, but maybe Nick, you can say what are the questions you get from advisors about investigating this part of the market and some of the risks they're trying to identify for clients? And
I suppose in my space, in the retirement lending space, and lifetime mortgages, equity release, property wealth, it's the risk of it's that longevity risk. What is if I do something now, what's the impact in 20 years' time? And then it's the conversation around, well, yes, let's acknowledge that the thing that we can know about our market is exactly what that risk will will translate, because equity release products have to be fixed rates. So a customer will know exactly what that debt's going to be at any time in the future, versus the benefit that they will get from taking that action now, and whether that's for their own benefit or whether it's intergenerational sort of wealth planning. I call it sort of inter-family planning, inter-family financial planning now. It's a conversation, and I like advisors when they're thinking about. I'm having a conversation with my client, but I'm talking more broadly than them. I'm talking about their children as well and their grandparents, because actually it's a family wealth conversation, and that's really broadening the conversation out. I suppose it's always that risk of taking action and the risk of not taking action.
Yeah.
It's I think really important.
Yeah.
And I think just to add on to that, in taking that intergenerational wealth into context, it's making sure that you are having conversations not only with one part of the family. So if you just can't having a conversation, say, with the husband, is the wife involved in those conversations? So the fact is, women live on average 2.5 years longer than a man. So it's almost the retention of your client base as well, because the chances, if the woman is involved in that conversation at that point, she could then potentially go off to her son and then go off to a different financial advisor. So it's having those intergenerational conversations, especially now IHT is such a hot topic, but also getting involved with other members of the family for that retention of those assets longer term.
Yeah, some opportunities there for advisors to bring people in there. And what are some? You're out and about over the country meeting advisors. I mean, IHT is obviously the big topic on their minds. But what sort of questions are you getting at the moment about the retirement space? What are they keen to talk
That was
about?
Actually the hot topic yesterday at a round table that I had. So IHT, but also what we talked about earlier is the emotional side of things. It's the counselling side of things, and actually having tools to support clients with these difficult conversations and advisors with these difficult conversations. At L&G, we do actually a lot on behavioural biases. So John Rowe and Andre Pioch, who are both fund managers at L&G, they do a lot of research in behavioural biases, because it's so important now, and it's so important, especially with clients, to think about that. We all have our own innate biases, and that there's biases towards products as well. So for example, with annuities, advisors, there'll be some advisors who've never sold an annuity before because they've been out of fashion for so long, but there'll also be advisors who have sold them but in different guises before. So that's just against the product side of things. So I think to go back to the initial question, it is the soft skills that people want. They want more from the soft skills, and also how we can I gave a stat before that 70% of people who access their drawdown pot last year didn't seek advice. It's making sure that we get to those 70% of people, and that advisors have the skills to facilitate their needs.
And Nick, what about you? And what are the sort of big questions you get from advisors at the moment?
Well, how do I get involved with the market? Is a really common question. There are a number of a number of lenders out in the market support advisors into that space through qualification support or business development support. The Equity Release Council are really strong in terms of supporting mortgage advisors into that equity release space. So I think that I suppose our big challenge is. Is getting more advisors switched into thinking about property wealth as an asset that they can manage on behalf of their clients. And it's almost a reverse ferret. It was, 2 years ago, it was your pension is sitting in an IHT nil-rated wrapper. Leave that where it is. Spend your property wealth. Now it's, oh, right, your pension is now going to be IHT, rateable. You need to spend that, but you're living in this £1 million asset over here. We need to get rid of some of that. We need to give that away as fast as you can. And using, having those conversations that establish the importance of any of those sort of options with customers, what their aspirations are. But also giving them things to think about as well, because clients don't think like we do. They think about it's my pension, it's my house, and they don't necessarily think about what that could do for them and the different things that it could do.
Yeah, really changing some of those conversations there. It's a good chance for advisors to engage with clients, as you were saying. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm conscious of time. You can just pass me my clicker back and we'll go through our learning objectives again. Thank you so much for joining us and taking us through that. Thank you very much for all your questions. If your question didn't get answered, Joe and Nick and the team are going to try and do so, and we'll contact you. CPD will be delivered this week. Let's just have a look at the learning objectives again. So these were exploring the shift from accumulation-focused planning to holistic retirement strategies, recognising the strategic role of property wealth and guaranteed income in modern retirement planning, and identify how advisors can enhance value through effective communication and collaboration. And just before I leave you, just to give you a heads up on a couple of professional advisor events happening over the next couple of months. Next week, on the 25th of March, we're going to be joined by Bailey Gifford. They're going to be discussing US growth, what really matters. And we're joined by Ben James, investment specialist on the Bailey Gifford American Fund. And then on the 23rd of April, we have our annual PA360 conference, huge conference in the city in London, the UK's largest annual management conference for advisors. We've got 40 speakers during the day. We're going to be covering a huge range of topics: retirement regulation, tax, estate planning, technology and investment. And the day will be rounded off with a keynote presentation from ITV's Robert Peston. So that's 6.5 hours CPD over the next couple of months. And as ever, if you want to find out more information or sign up, you can do so by visiting professionaladvisor.com/events. So that's it for today's session. Thank you so much again to Joe and Nick for your time today and taking our questions. And we hope to see you at another Professional Advisor event very soon. Goodbye.
Thank you.